After dark, things get colder, quieter, and far more creepy. Today, I've scoured the far reaches of my website's front page to find some very scary, allegedly true stories that take place in the darkest hours of the night. Don't close your eyes and keep your friends close, because the darkness may just devour you both. If you have a story of your own, share it with us at darkstories.org. I'd love to see some night shift stories and graveyard stories. Now, like this video, because we're about to begin. Shirley, Wisconsin, from Poofey. In 2008, I was 18 years old. A couple of friends of mine and I decided we were going to start ghost hunting. I have and still do have a deep interest in the paranormal, but at that point I had people to indulge it with. We wanted to go somewhere away from the small Wisconsin town that we all grew up in. I live about 30 minutes away from Green Bay. One of my friends was looking for haunted locations around the area, somewhere far, but not too far, far enough to make an event out of it. We decided on a small town called Shirley. There was a reported haunted cemetery there, a place where you could see a floating light in the corner of the cemetery, or so they say. The legends also include hearing voices and crying, typical haunted cemetery stuff. We had a good old-fashioned VHS camcorder that we recorded with. It had an old-school light on it too. It got the job done for a group of 18 to 20-year-olds who only just decided to go ghost hunting. The mention of this camera is important. Either way, one of the three friends I was doing the expedition with was excited about this. We stayed up all day and night before the trip talking about it, making jokes of what-if situations that ended in humorous ways. She and I have and still do get along very well. The other two friends were childhood friends of mine, and her boyfriend at the time. Soon enough, the day came we were to leave. We began driving to our destination. I'll introduce you to the group. The friend who was in the back seat with me was Cece. Momo was in the passenger seat, and the boyfriend was driving. His name was Lewis. I was sitting just behind Lewis. We're driving the car towards Green Bay. Our destination of Shirley is about 20 minutes past Green Bay. We started driving pretty late, and it was soon nighttime. The stars were out in all their brightness. We were all very excited and in great moods, smoking cigarettes, making jokes. Cece and I could not stop laughing at each other in the back seat. She and I had developed an inside joke by saying, "You know what's messed up?" Meaning I was just thinking the same thing, or the same thing happened to me. There was a tone to the way we said it that made it either funny or serious. It got to the point where we kept saying it so much, we basically began to just say the same things at the same time. We both noticed how strange this was, and we did our best to avoid it, to be less awkward. We tried engaging conversation with Momo and Lewis, but they didn't seem to be as interested. During the car ride, everyone was noticing shooting stars out the window. A lot of shooting stars. Everyone except me. But every 5 minutes or so, one of the other three would say they saw one. Because I didn't see them, I kept thinking they were playing a prank on me. I looked out the window and saw plenty of stars, but no shooting ones. I grew frustrated. I said in a joking but angry tone, just show me one shooting. Oh, what the hell? Before I could even finish my plea, a star shot across my line of vision. I was in awe. It was impossible. I didn't even believe it. The timing was perfect. It was like the cosmos were saying, "Here you go, now shut up." I also couldn't help but notice on the way there that we had no cars behind us, and we were on the highway. Green Bay is a popular city, but never once during this whole ride did a car pass us. We never passed another car either, or see even a bit of headlights. All of it was extremely strange, but they were only the beginnings of this night. When we finally made it to the road leading to Shirley, it was surreal. It's like part of the roads didn't make sense. There were trees in strange places, signs in weirder places. I remember driving through a very small town that consisted of a gas station and nothing else. There were a couple of streetlights. All I know is that we were soon through that town, if you could even call it that. The main road to Shirley was a long, straight one. It had a lot of hills, notable hills. And let me say again, despite going through a small town, we still have not seen a single other car on the road, or off of it. It was as if we were suddenly all alone in the world. It felt peaceful, but also quite intimidating. And then something pretty creepy happened. We drove by a buck, a male deer, on the side of the road. It was completely motionless, standing tall and watching us drive by. Nothing weird about that, right? Well, after we drove past it, we saw dozens of them, all in the same position, all watching us drive by, all males. They were lined up on the side of the road. Some sort of terrifying Animal Kingdom welcome crew. I'd never seen anything like it before. Before long, we made it to Shirley. We found that it consisted of a mill of some sort, as well as a bar, another bar, some old buildings that may have been turned into apartments, a church with a cemetery next to it, but not the one we were going for. In all honesty, we didn't find the right cemetery on the first trip to Shirley. Yeah, we had to go back once or twice. I can't remember how many. But it was this first trip that I'm telling you about that was something straight out of the Twilight Zone. The roads of Shirley were pretty bare, besides the occasional farmhouse and barn. The fields separated the houses pretty well, but still, it seemed like there were a lot of lights in the town. For such a small population, it was like every house had 5 to 6 lights outside, not including decorations or solar lights, but actual lights, bright ones, on the house, the garage, the barn, a pole, in the fields. Lights just kept showing up. Some of them would disappear the closer we got to them. The whole time, there were still no cars around us, no people walking about the town. There was no other movement at all. The world had become a randomly lit oil painting, still, lifeless. We made it to the cemetery church and tried to film something from the car. None of us felt like getting out here. Mostly because we all couldn't help but notice that it didn't feel normal outside. We would stick our hands and heads out of the windows, and it felt wrong. Like if we got out of the car, we'd never be able to get back in. So none of us wanted to even attempt to get out. There was a cornfield to the right of the car, tall corn that was ready to be picked, if not beyond ready to get cut down. At this point, Momo took the camera and passed it to Lewis, who began to film the cemetery. Then he passed the camera back to Momo. This happened a couple of times. It was then that, out of nowhere, we finally see a car driving away from us. This struck a nerve with Lewis, who had been driving the whole time with no signs of other people, so he decided to follow it. He wanted to catch up to the person, but he never could. He sped through the town, going 45, 50, 65, 70, but the car ahead of us kept the same distance, no matter what speed we went. I guess it's possible that they thought we were up to no good, or they thought that we wanted to do them harm, but to us, it was like no matter how hard we tried, we could not get close to them. I also noticed that it didn't have a back license plate, which is obviously illegal. We then watched the car take a curve in the road that goes to the left. We kept following them, but never found this curve in the road. There were no left turns at all. We're all saying, it turned here, right? The road should have curved already, but the car was gone, and there was nowhere for it to go. All that lay to the left were fields. I don't know how to explain this. Eventually, we saw a car driving towards us. It was a truck, actually, a dark one. You couldn't see who was driving it. This truck had no plate on the front. It kept driving by us like it had multiple streets to turn down and surprise us with, but there were probably only 4 roads in this town. It was all fields, like I said. Then we saw 3 cars coming towards us. I felt nearly relieved. Was normal society returning to us? But no, these were also 3 trucks, all of which lacked plates as well. One after another, 3 of the same looking truck in perfect intervals drive by. All these vehicles were heading the same direction. All their taillights disappeared soon behind us, even though these never turned, so we should have kept seeing their lights. As would be expected, our excitement was beginning to die down. None of us wanted to get out in fear of falling into the false reality that was Shirley, Wisconsin. So after attempting to follow another car which disappeared on the same road as the last one, we decided it was time to go. But I insisted that I wanted to go back to the cemetery, and that I would even get out of the car if we did. But then, as if to defy my wishes, out of nowhere headlights appeared behind us. These felt different. They felt hateful, angry. This didn't seem like just some car that would pop up on a casual drive. It honestly felt like an evil pair of headlights. Lewis freaked out and said that we were leaving now. He turned onto the road we took in and was driving well over the speed limit. The headlights were still behind us, keeping pace. He drove faster, but they did the same. Faster and faster, we could almost feel the car catching air on the many small hills on this road. The lights behind us started bobbing in and out of sight behind the hills as we went, until they just didn't come back up. There was no way they turned. There was no other roads. We'd already passed all the houses. Even if they turned off their lights, we would have seen them. No one could have stopped that suddenly and switched off their lights without something happening. I know we were going 85 miles per hour, and so were they. We got to the road we turned on to leave Shirley. It felt relieving. There was an old car that was about to turn into Shirley. They waited for us to turn out on the road they were on. They didn't have to. No other cars were coming. We saw them for a while. They had time to turn. The headlights of our car hit the side of theirs. I looked inside to see who was going to Shirley at this time of night, but I saw no one in the car. I asked if anyone saw the driver, but the others responded with no. They either didn't notice or didn't care to look, but I had. With the way our headlights were, we should have seen them. Not to mention, this would be the first actual sedan to have drove past us. I felt relieved to be on that road, but of course, more deer watched us leave. I was confused and frustrated, and I had so many questions, but who could answer them? What was up with this town? I couldn't help but think of all of this. Everyone else was silent, like they were all drained. I picked up something to look at it, maybe my phone, I'm not sure. Phones weren't entertaining yet at the time. I remember texting a friend and he was at my apartment. It was then that I noticed out of the corner of my eye that Cece was slowly turning her head to look out the back window, and she started to cry, hysterically crying. I was caught off guard. I asked her, "Cece, what's wrong?" Then I followed her eyes, and I looked out the back window. There, from the road we just drove on, was a dead-end road with an old ball-top street lamp right in the middle, trees all around it, surrounding the dead end. The dead end that we'd just driven through. But that wasn't all. Under the light stood a being in a white cloak and gown, the shape of which reminded me of a Grim Reaper. I could not see their face, the hood covered it, but I could feel them looking at me. I stared at them for as long as I could, before I remembered why I even looked back there in the first place. So I returned my focus to Cece. I put my hand on her shoulder and asked her, "What did you see? Tell me what you saw back there." She said between her sobs, "I saw a man. He was in white, on the side of the road. He tried to open your door. I saw him out of the corner of my eye in Lewis's window. When I looked up, he was reaching for your door. Then I followed him with my eyes, and the road changed. Then I looked away." I couldn't believe it, but I told her I saw the same thing. It was reaching for my door. How did the road change? She said he just went from being on the side of the road to being in the middle of it. She couldn't understand. I couldn't understand any of this either. It was like we were the only two in the car, because Lewis and Momo said nothing. They didn't ask any questions. They didn't wonder if Cece was okay. They didn't even look behind themselves. I don't think they wanted to. It was almost like something was telling us, "Stay out." Momo and Lewis both said they didn't say anything because they felt like they didn't care. They felt emotionless. They didn't look behind them. They didn't utilize their mirrors to look behind us. They just looked ahead, like everything went black and white and emotionless. We went back a couple of times, but it was nothing like what happened the first time. I don't know what was so special about that first time. Maybe it was the day we went. Maybe it was a difference in energy. The way we'd gone with a desire to see something strange. We went to Shirley looking for a cemetery that we never found, and we left with a very screwed up story. Some folks don't believe us, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't change that it happened. I just wonder if it will ever happen to anyone else, or if it already has. I wonder if they got out of their car. I wonder if they were chased out the way we were. Either way, when we got back to my apartment, we watched the little bit of video we had recorded. We saw the trucks, the taillights, the many random lights in town, even a few moments where the lens flare from 3 barn lights resembled the white hooded figure that saw us out. This made Cece cry again. But what made my skeptical friend rewind the video over and over was when Lewis handed Momo the camera when we were parked next to the cornfield. On the video, you can clearly see a man with a straw hat and overalls walk out of the cornfield, looking at us, but his legs were gone. Voices in the Night, from the Ghost King 092. I am to this very day afraid to sleep at night. This happened on July 8th of this year. It was early enough in the night at around 8:30. I was just celebrating my 27th birthday, and it was an amazing day. I decided to go to bed and lie down for a while, rest my eyes. But something woke me up hours later, something that sounded like my grandmother whispering good night. I was half asleep, so I brushed it off as an auditory hallucination. But now that I was awake, I heard it again. It was much closer than before. Immediately, I jumped from my bed and checked my room to make sure it was not a trick someone was playing on me, because my grandmother passed away in 2012. I was scared to the point that I was turning pale. I could feel it, because the whispers kept coming. Good night, good night, good night. What really made me freeze from fright was the mirror in my room. It was rocking back and forth on the wall. Then I saw a figure of a person standing right at my bedroom door. They were looking at me. I couldn't move at this point. I took it upon myself the next morning to call my mother and father to my house so I could talk to them about it, but only after mustering the courage to go back to my bed and try to fall asleep. The next day, when I talked to my mother, she immediately gasped. She told me that before my grandmother died, she used her last breath to say goodnight to me. That was my father's mother, and all he had to say about this was, "Things like this happen all the time, especially when you're in a house on your own. You'll be fine." I don't know about that, but I think he was wrong. Because the moment I put the phone down after talking to him, the mirror in my room was shattered. I heard glass breaking and ran to my room to find it in pieces. To this day, I'm freaked out about it. I don't like to sleep in my room, yet I still hear whispers coming from it. Nowadays, I sleep with my Rottweiler dog to make sure nothing happens at night, but I'm still terrified. What if it isn't my grandmother, and I truly do have something to fear? Demon in the Night, from my sister's keeper. This is a story from my sister, and I'll write it from her point of view. In college, I lived away from home, and so would only get the comforts of a home whenever I stayed over with friends and their families. One weekend, my friend In invited me over to her house for dinner and let me sleep over. Her parents were very religious and had a full-blown altar with a crucifix, along with statues of saints all set up in the living room, with a red bulb illuminating it in the night when all the other lights were off. That night, we set up our bedding on the floor of the living room, as it was larger than In's bedroom, and I settled in for the night. Sometime after midnight, my friend finally drifted to sleep, and I was left on the verge of dozing off. Just as I was about to turn over to go to sleep, something in the corner of the doorway caught my eye, and then I froze and struggled to breathe. There was a dark figure standing there, the dull red light from the altar almost reaching it. Almost. Its red eyes peered almost angrily at us from the door. I was too scared to attempt to breathe. The creature was at least 6 feet tall, and its eyes were like floating red orbs. It stood there for about 30 seconds before turning and heading upstairs, to In's parents' room. My heart was still beating in my ears, and my breathing was shallow. I didn't know what to make of it. I remained quiet and didn't dare move a muscle in case it came back. I didn't sleep that entire night. The next morning, just as the sunlight crept into the room, I woke up my friend and told her about what I saw. Apparently, In has seen this creature before as well. She's grown used to it now, and while she gets scared sometimes, she just tells herself it doesn't want her. I don't know what she means by that, but I was too afraid to ask at that point. I'm not friends with her anymore, but I still shiver at the thought of that night and the demon that watched us sleep. The Night I Swam with Death, from Anonymous. I'm 52 years old now, but this took place when I was 16. I was living in Highlands, Texas at the time, with an uncle of mine. 2 friends and I, one night, decided to swipe some alcohol from him. We lived not too far from the river, so we decided to do our drinking off an old dock that hung out over the river, but was ultimately unused. As the night progressed, I was sitting on the edge of the dock. I passed out from drinking too much. I went over backwards, hitting a metal beam protruding from the dock in the middle of my back. I hit the water, still not knowing what was happening, and I began gasping for air, but my efforts ended with my lungs burning. The more my lungs burned, the harder I gasped. As I kept fighting for air and enduring the pain that I had deep within my chest, I heard a voice. It told me to relax, told me to stop struggling. The voice was so comforting, so I did as it instructed me to. A most wonderful and comforting feeling swept over me. It was a peace that I'd never felt or experienced before, one that's impossible to describe. I felt nothing, no pain, no cold. At this point, I opened my eyes for the first time this whole experience. I could see myself sinking way below the surface of the river. All I remember thinking was how wonderful I felt as I looked up. I closed my eyes, and everything went black. What I remember next is thrusting my arms out, lifting my head out of the water, laughing my head off. I realized then that I had just washed up on the edge of the river like a log bobbing against the tide. Remembering my watch wasn't waterproof like an idiot, lifting my arm out of the river, falling face first back into the water. I pulled myself up again, and I began to figure out what I just went through. I sat there in the water trying to believe what I just experienced. I got back up on the dock and back to my friends. I questioned them about what happened, asked them how long I'd been gone. My friends said that I had been gone for about 15 minutes. They figured I'd be okay when I went over the edge. I asked if they even checked on me, and they said no. I sat on the dock, again trying to understand what I just went through. Did I drown? Did someone really call out to me? Did I really sink below the waves only to wash up on the shore like driftwood? I have no idea if this was a near-death experience or a death experience. Just don't go drinking at night while sitting over a river. Something in my yard, from Matt. I live out in the sticks, as people in Georgia call it, even though most stores are close by and there's a lot of traffic, but there's still deep woods nearby. I like to stay up late and play video games with friends. Most of the time we don't go to bed till 1 or 2 in the morning. One night we were all tired, especially me because it was a tough day at work that day. It was about 1:30 in the morning, and my friends had gotten off for a few minutes to go get some food. I'll never forget that night. I don't know why, but I crossed over from my PlayStation to the left where my window was. I brushed the blinds out of the way to look outside, as it had been storming and I wanted to see how bad it was. Across the street, there is a street lamp that comes on at night. But what I saw out there chilled my blood and froze me to the spot. Directly across from my window is a cherry tree we've had since we moved in. Standing under it, almost 7 feet tall, was a long, thin creature. I say creature because it was pale and too skinny and tall to be human. It was completely nude, but had no genitalia. I wanted to shout or scream, but I couldn't. Its mouth sprouted fangs or tusks like some sort of orc. The two of us just stared at each other. Its eyes were solid red. I was so terrified that I began to back up, but my phone went off, and I let out a not-so-manly yelp as I ran over and answered it in a panic. My friend begged for me to calm down, and I eventually told him, but he dismissed me as crazy. Angrily, I hung up, and I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. A week later, I was up late again, painting some models for a tabletop game. The time slipped by, and before I could realize it, it was 2 in the morning. Once again, I decided to look out the window, as by now it was a habit. But nearly pressed against the window was that thing again. Its chest came up to the top so I couldn't see its face. I could still feel its dark, blood-red eyes on me, though. I let out a shaky breath as I tried to think of what to do. Slowly it lifted its hand, and a clawed-like finger slowly scratched the glass with a quiet screech from outside. I yelped and dove into bed. I stayed there until the room lit up with daylight. I'm terrified of looking out of windows, because I'm always afraid that I'll see it again, and I'm terrified that it might find a way inside to get even closer. Well, what a diverse set of stories we had today. near-death experiences, monsters at the window, alternate dimensions. My spooky tastes are absolutely sated, but there will be more spoops to come on our way to Halloween 2019, so make sure to survive and tune in next time. Good night. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you have a story of your own, share it with us at darkstories.org. To support the show, check the links below. There's a link to my Patreon and a link to my merch store. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from my previous normal upload. Daydreamer says, "That's why I don't hike. I'll just wait for the home invaders instead." Well, you know what they say. If you build it, they will come to steal your Xbox and your child. The Forlorn Bat says, "That face when you're just trying to peacefully hike, but the crunching of your Nature Valley granola bar attracts Bigfoot, so you have to give him one of your only 2 bars." Well, Forlorn, don't tell him about the other bar, unless you really want a full-body cavity search from Bigfoot. Well, then again. Vegan Jinx says, "I'm going hiking and camping the 11th through the 13th. Let's hope nothing like this happens. Good luck out there and stay safe, friend. I'll be jealous of you. And actually, if you do experience something, I'll be even more jealous, because that's how my weird, creepy brain works." Rachel Shipton says, "I hope you and your wife had a good anniversary." Well, we had some cheesecake and peach cobbler a la mode to die for. But we're still alive, don't worry. And No Need says, "Darkness. Goes jogging in the woods for his health. Local cryptids. Oh lord, he comin'." You got that right. I'm mega chonk. I'm no longer a snack for any cryptids. More of a 3 or 4 course meal. Well, that brings me to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, more scary stories are on the way. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.